Have you ever heard the expression, the rich get richer and the poor get poorer? Well, at no time was this truer than during the Middle Ages. If you weren't born into money, then you were likely to languish at the bottom of the broke pile forever. But there were ways to make a few gold coins if you knew how. Let's travel back in time to the Middle Ages and take a look at fighters, prayers, workers, the rising merchant class, and how not to hack off a French king. Welcome to Medieval Madness. Born to fight. Medieval society was split into what are known as the three estates: those who pray, those who fight, and those who work. At the top of the pile of those who fight was, of course, the king. He was the lord of all the kingdom and therefore all of the land. The monarch's royal estate brought him an annual income which he used to fund the royal households as well as various government departments. With the approval of government, the king could also raise taxes to obtain extra money and subsidize wars. Even though doing so could breed resentment among the people, being a successful conqueror could bring in lots of needed cash, helping to boost a country's economy and make a monarch even richer. Emperor Basil II of Byzantium was one of the wealthiest rulers of the Eastern Roman Empire. His reign lasted for 49 years from 976 to 1025, and saw his well-ordered authority, conquest of territory and control of trading routes fill his treasury with unparalleled riches. It could be said that Basil was also a little bit mean with his wealth, preferring to invest it in his army and fortifications rather than on court luxuries. However, it did mean that by the time that he died at the end of a long reign, he had accumulated such a surplus of riches that for decades afterwards his empire was financially stable. Something of a politically rare accomplishment in the Middle Ages. Although it should also be said that as far as wealth went for the medieval ruler, it wasn't all about money. Influence, the loyalty of armies, possessions, the ownership of land and control over trade were just as important as cold hard cash. This is why we fight. In the group of those that fight, the monarch was followed by the rest of the aristocracy, the three ranks of lords who were in order of precedence: the dukes, the earls, and the barons. The title of duke is usually held by the king's sons. After this came the earls in the 14th century, and they numbered anywhere between 7 and 14. Then came the barons, the lowest aristocratic rank, with between 40 and 70. All the lords were known as tenants-in-chief because they were given their primary estates directly from the king, and he could take them back anytime he liked. In return, these nobles had to attend parliament and form the House of Lords. They would also need to fight for their king, but only for 40 days each year. Anything over that, and they would be handsomely compensated for their trouble. During the 14th century, an earl could collect anywhere between £700 and £3,000 from his estates through rents. Thomas, the second Earl of Lancaster, who died in 1322, did pretty well for himself because he was also the Earl of Leicester, Derby, Lincoln, and Salisbury at the same time. In 1311, his income was coming in at around a healthy £11,000 a year, which is well over $6.5 million in today's money. And the closer you get to the king, then the richer you were likely to become. Queen Isabella, wife of King Edward II, gave herself 20,000 marks, or about £13,333 a year at the end of the 1330s, which is close to about £10 million today. Hugh Despencer the Younger, favourite of the king, was given titles like the Lordship of Glamorgan and showered with gifts that even included several castles such as Wallingford, Hanley, Odderham, and Bristol. A war was triggered between King Edward and his barons because of it, during which the king confiscated their baronial titles and lands, making more money for himself and the Despencer family. By 1326, the royal treasury contained £62,000, a cool £46.5 million today. The next tier down in the those that fight category were the knights. In the 14th century, there were about 1,100 of them around. They had tenants on their smaller manors and had themselves an income of about £40 a year. Not too bad when you consider that a skilled labourer only earned less than 3 shillings a week. As a knight, if you couldn't get a king to start a civil war to defend your honour, you could always make sure that you were on the winning side of a battle to bring home some extra cash by ransoming any prisoners that you captured. When the King of France, Jean II, was taken at the Battle of Poitiers in 1356, his ransom of a staggering 3 million écus, or 660,000 grand, went to the treasury, and even a lowly French soldier could be ransomed. A knight could pick up about 60 crowns, around £13, if a private arrangement was reached with the prisoner's family. Not a bad payday at all, especially if you could capture more than one. Makes me want to pray. If fighting doesn't take your fancy, then how about joining the church? There was definitely money to be made by becoming one of those who prayed. In 14th century England, there were hundreds of priests and chaplains across the country. In 1348, there were around 1,000 religious houses, including 200 friaries, 150 nunneries, 700 hospitals, and 650 monasteries. The Grand Benedictine abbeys of Glastonbury and Westminster had incomes of more than £2,000 a year. Most abbeys owned lots of land, some had their own mills, granaries, bakehouses, and breweries, and were thriving businesses. Across Europe, monasteries became known for their wealth and helped the Catholic Church to become one of the most powerful institutions in the world. In the 14th century, a bishop was getting roughly the same income as an earl. The best part was, even a peasant could become a monk with the abbot's approval and work their way up through the ranks. Commoners could advance to the level of abbot or abbess, but it was usually the nobility who were appointed to the highest church positions. There were opportunities within the church, even for those of lower birth, for those with ambition. How about becoming a cardinal or an archbishop? Despite being an illegitimate child, John Stafford became Archbishop of Canterbury in 1443. Thomas Wolsey was first made Archbishop of York in 1514 and then made a cardinal by Pope Leo X a year later, meaning that he had precedence over all other English clergy. All that despite famously being the son of a butcher. When he became Lord Chancellor to King Henry VIII, Wolsey had enough wealth to spend 200,000 crowns, around £25 million, on renovating Hampton Court Palace. Yeah, not bad going for a butcher's boy. It's not hard to see that those who pray could easily earn as much as those that fight. Work It. Now we are left with those who work, which doesn't sound great, especially when you learn that there wasn't a great deal of social mobility in the Middle Ages. People tended to be stuck at the level they were born into, although one way to make a better life for yourself was to move to another area where there were better prospects. If your father was a peasant and you stayed at home, then it was likely that you would become a farming peasant too, work the land all your life, and remain in poverty. But if you were skilled in a craft and able to sell your produce, you might make a decent amount of money, maybe enough to purchase a little bit more land. With hard work, talent, and of course a little bit of luck, who knows, you could become a wealthy landowner in a few years. Perhaps if you moved to the nearest large town or city, you would be able to find better paid work. Becoming a servant actually had its perks, and depending on whom you served, wages could be pretty good. It's in the cities that, especially in the 12th and 13th centuries, we see the rise of the merchant classes. No longer tied to the land all across Europe, towns expanded, becoming busy hubs for trade and commerce. Gaining autonomous administrations meant that places like Bruges, Paris, Hamburg, Venice, and Girona could gain greater economic independence and better social mobility. More and more peasants migrated from the villages to become the crucial workers needed for the merchants to expand their businesses. Goods coming in from Africa, Portugal, the Italian city-states, and other Mediterranean ports included everything from luxury textiles like silk to perfume, and spices to jewels. Of course, exporting was also lucrative. Every time goods changed hands, they would increase in value, and with the right timing and a little bit of networking, you could make a good deal of money very quickly. Bank job. And what to do with all that profit that you've accumulated from your clever buying and selling? Why not follow the example of the Medicis in Florence and become merchant bankers? All merchants dealt with money, they were either lending it, borrowing it, or both. Providing credit was a key part of the trade, so why not turn that into a business and become a financier? The Medicis were thought to be one of the richest families in Europe, if not the richest, during the 15th century. After making their money in the wool trade, they opened their first bank in 1397. Founded in Florence, they had about 9 branches in operation during their peak in cities such as London, Rome, Geneva, and Avignon. Francesco Dottini of Prato, who was born in 1335, also made the progression from trader to banker, and is the poster boy for how to make a better life for yourself in the Middle Ages. He began as an apprentice for a Florentine merchant. Then he joined a group of traders going to Avignon in 1358, which was at the time the papal seat and had become a thriving city. Once there, Francesco set up business as an arms trader during the 100 Years' War, so that was quite lucrative. Later, he traded in anything profitable, such as art, cloth, jewelry, wool, spices, metals, wheat, until, having made his fortune, he returned to Florence and opened a bank, later opening further branches in Barcelona, Valencia, Mallorca, Pisa, and Genoa. Break the bank. But take note, dear listener, if you do decide to go down this road as a way of making medieval money, don't lend too much money to one person, especially if that person is a monarch. Crusading had made the Templars rich. All new recruits had to hand over possessions on entering the order, and as a favoured charity, they had soon grown in wealth and power. During the reign of King Philippe II, the order was so trusted that they ran the royal French treasury. By the 1240s, the Templars were providing financial banking services and founded foreign exchange and money transfers. However, the debts owed to them by various royals were considerable, and when they refused to let the future King Philip IV become a Templar member, the writing was on the wall. Keen to see the back of his own debts and get hold of their wealth, with the help of the Pope, Philippe had dozens of French Templar members arrested, tortured, and executed for heresy. And if all else fails, why not do what Mansa Musa did and find yourself a couple of gold mines? Musa was the ruler of the Mali Empire in the 14th century. His wealth mainly came from the empire's taxing of the salt trade in the northern regions and the panning and mining of gold in the south. Over time, he was able to amass a vast fortune, and his empire stretched across Senegal, Guinea, Mauritania, and the Gambia. On a pilgrimage to Mecca in 1324, he spent some time in Cairo en route. Musa's lavish gift-giving there was said to have caused a temporary economic depression in the Egyptian economy. Mansa Musa has been described as the richest person to have ever lived, his reserves of gold the stuff of legend. Thank you so much for watching this episode of Medieval Madness. Please do subscribe to the channel if you enjoyed it, and as always, I'll see you in the next episode. Cheers everyone!